Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grilling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by BetNow.eu for a 100% cashback bonus on your first deposit. Use the promo code TRUTH100. I am your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster, and I'm flying solo today, which isn't any surprise. Anthony Cervino had something come up. I think it was Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. If you listened all last week, we had to hear the drivel about how the Vikings couldn't get it done in a big situation. And my point all year has been this. The Dallas Cowboys are as talented as almost any team in football. But they're not talented when it comes to the head coach, Jason Garrett. And we saw that last night. Dak Prescott actually played a great game. Maybe his best passing game of the season, but that was because the Minnesota Vikings and Mike Zimmer decided to take away Ezekiel Elliott. And they took Elliott away, held him to 2.7 yards per carry. I think it was 20 carries for 47 yards. The thing that's disturbing here is they went away from that. I mean, when you look at the play calling in the last 5 minutes of the first or of the second half, it's mind-blowing. I mean, after Dak had completed 5 passes to his 3 receivers, Jason Witten, to get Dallas to the Minnesota 19 at the 2-minute warning, the Cowboys followed an 8-yard first down pass to Cooper with a run up the middle to Elliott. The try was stuffed, but first-year offensive coordinator under direction of head coach Jason Garrett inexplicably tried the same thing on the following play. The result was a 3-yard loss and a 4th and 5 on Dallas's final shot. Prescott stared down Elliott on an out route, and his pass attempt was swatted away by Vikings star linebacker Eric Kendricks. Kendricks is one of the best cover linebackers in the NFL, and to attack him with Ezekiel Elliott when you guys got guys like Amari Cooper, Randall Cobb, who were having big days, Michael Gallup, it's amazing to me. I mean, this was a miscalculated mismatch in the biggest situation of the game. Then the Cowboys have now dropped their 4th game of the season by going away from what was working for them. They took the ball away from Dak Prescott, and they ended up paying for it. And when you look at this, the thing that I think people are really missing is they got the ball back with like 20 seconds left. And it was obviously a predetermined for the kick returner, Tavon Austin, to basically fair catch the ball. And when you look back at this, he catches the ball at the 40-yard line, and he fair catches it. The Vikings were in max protect on punt, and they were not down the field to cover this punt. The closest guy, when you watch this film, is 17 yards away from Austin. And they have Austin. I mean, Austin is a 10-year veteran. Why can't you trust your players? Because a great coach will trust his players. Jason Garrett didn't trust Tavon Austin. Tavon Austin catches the ball at 40 with nobody within 15 yards of him. The worst that happens is they're starting on the 45 or the 40 of the Minnesota Vikings going in to score. Now, I know they would have had 12 seconds instead, but what the Cowboys did was they took basically a knee by fair catching the ball. And when you look at this, I mean, they come out and they run 2 plays that are like 3-yard out routes that they run out of bounds just so they can throw the Hail Mary. I mean, number one, if you've got the ball at the 40, just throw the Hail Mary. You could throw 3 Hail Marys and maybe get one of them. Instead, Jason Garrett decides to not. Plus, Tavon Austin's a really good return man. And with 15 yards difference in between him and the punting team, there's a decent shot here that, he's going to have a hell of a return. And you probably got a better chance to return that punt for a touchdown than you do to throw a Hail Mary. But I think the big story last night is you had a huge battle of 2 guys that are in the conversation with Christian McCaffrey as the best running back in football. Dalvin Cook completely outplayed Zeke Elliott in Sunday night's game, and I think he ended up with like 183 total yards on 33 touches. It's the difference in the game. I mean, when you're playing the Minnesota Vikings, shouldn't you be trying to take away Dalvin Cook? The Dallas Cowboys' run defense, it's not weak, but it's not the strength of their defense. Minnesota took away the running game, and whoever took away the running game last night was more than likely going to win the game. Now, for lack of a better phrase, I think the Vikings made a tremendous leap last night, and they were propelled by a quarterback who has had a notorious history of struggling in primetime games, as our good friend Anthony Cervino was telling us. Kirk Cousins, 220 yards, but the big thing is he played error-free football on a big stage. He utilized play action to pick up big gains to Cook and an Adam Thielenless receiving core. Kyle Rudolph played big. And I think right now the Minnesota Vikings deserve to be regarded as among the cream of the NFC's crop, along with San Francisco, New Orleans, and of course their division rival Green Bay. So I think last night Minnesota has let everybody know that they are here, and they're going to be a factor the rest of the season. And you never know. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings are headed for their 5th Super Bowl in their team's history. All right, next up, the Green Bay Packers battled the Carolina Panthers. Snow flurries whipping around Lambeau Field. It doesn't get any better than that. The Packers defense bowed up, stuffed Christian McCaffrey inches short of the goal line to seal a one-score victory. A couple things I took away here was the way the Packers, in Packer weather, were able to control the game by running the ball. I mean, that's what a Packer team does. And with this team, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to do everything because they can run the ball so well. And the Panthers, Kyle Allen played really well. He tossed a career-high 307 yards passing, 28 for 43, many of which were dimes in the Green Bay's coverages. And Allen played big despite the conditions and getting battered by the Packers' pass rush. He was sacked 3 times. He was hit 9 times. And the Panthers basically moved the ball all game long. And with Christian McCaffrey there, of Carolina's 9 possessions, 8 ventured into Green Bay territory, including the first 7. And it's 2 miscues from Allen that will haunt the 23-year-old quarterback. He fumbled a snap near midfield that Green Bay turned into a touchdown. And later, Allen threw an ill-advised pass in the end zone that was intercepted, and the Packers earned a field goal on the ensuing drive. Those 2 plays were the difference in this game, but I don't think it takes away from the fact that Kyle Allen looks like he is the answer to Cam Newton when it comes to the Carolina Panthers. And I think that they are definitely a contender to make the playoffs from what we saw yesterday. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Los Angeles Rams 17-12. And the Steelers are a team that went from a franchise that was based on defense to over the last decade or so has transitioned with, of course, the big 3 of Bell, Big Ben, well, the Killer Bees, and Antonio Brown into an offensive team. But adding Minkah Fitzpatrick, and I think another one that is lost is when they added Joe Hayden last year. And this is a team that can win on defense. And that defensive success, I mean, Joe Hayden had a game that was reminiscent of his Pro Bowl years in Cleveland. They denied Jared Goff attempts to cup all game long, and nobody has really been able to do that this year. Fitzpatrick had a huge interception. What I take away from this is I've ripped Mike Tomlin a lot in the past because I thought I said he was a bad coach. I was wrong because this man is a great motivator. And I'll say this, I think that he is the kind of coach that gets less out of more. And when you give him more, I don't think he's as good a coach. I think he is really good at getting guys to play above the level that they are capable of. Now, can they make the playoffs? I think they can because they have one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. As long as Mason Rudolph can take care of the ball and not turn the ball over, this team is a team to be reckoned with. I mean, it kind of reminds me, it was at 2003 or 4, I think it was 2004, Big Ben's first year, where he goes 13-3, but it was done because he didn't turn the ball over and he let the defense work, and that's what's happening here. Next up, we have my Cincinnati Bengals. And Andy Dalton cost them another game. 49-13, the Bengals lose to the Ravens. Lamar Jackson continues to make his case for the MVP honors as he destroyed the Cincinnati Bengals defense, but who doesn't? RG3 could have started this game, and they would have won the game by probably a similar score. To watch the Bengals defense run around without a clue what they were supposed to be doing is just amazing. Ryan Finley made his NFL debut as a starting quarterback because, of course, the Bengals in their infinite wisdom, benched Andy Dalton. And I think what we see here is you got an old school coach like John Harbaugh going up against Cincinnati Bengals coach Zach, as I like to call him, Opie Taylor. You had Sean McVay, who's the boy of wonder, going up against Mike Tomlin. And when the PlayStation coaches, as my buddy Joe Kelly, who does the Bengals show with me, says, played the old-time football, the PlayStation loses 9 times out of 10. And what we have here with McVay and Taylor is two guys that really don't have a clue. When you watch the lack of adjustments by both teams during games, I mean, the Rams last year brought an offense in that most of the NFL wasn't prepared for. They got to the Super Bowl, and as soon as they played an old school coach that figured them out, everybody else figured them out because everybody's watched that film from the Super Bowl last year. And the thing that stands out to me is Todd Gurley was having a good game. But when you get to the fourth quarter, Todd Gurley didn't touch the ball again. And Sean McVay's like, well, we were in a rotation, and it just wasn't his turn. And that is absolutely asinine. When you're in a game that's as big as this game, because let's face it, with an undefeated 49ers team there, they can't afford to lose too many more games. And they did. And with Zach Taylor, I know this is more on the Bengals front office than anything, but Zach Taylor is so unprepared to be an NFL football coach that it is mind-blowing. And I know that there's no way the Bengals will fire him after this season. The only thing I can tell you as a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I'm hoping they lose every game because what I saw Saturday from LSU quarterback Joe Burrow tells me that that might be the one guy that can fix this. If you remember the Indianapolis Colts, they're in trouble. I mean, the Colts could have been the Los Angeles Colts in the late 90s, early 2000s. They got lucky, got the number one pick with a 1-15 season in 1998, and they lucked into Peyton Manning. It saved their franchise. It built Lucas Oil Field, and the rest is history. The only thing that can save the Cincinnati Bengals franchise right now is to get a guy who is similar to a Peyton Manning who can come in and just win a lot of games and overcome a poor front office. But next up, we want to talk about a poor front office. We'll go to the Cleveland Browns, who absolutely had to win after last week's loss to Denver against the Buffalo Bills. And they did. They got it done. And it wasn't like Baker Mayfield was awesome, but they did enough to win over the Buffalo Bills. And the thing that stands out to me about the Bills is they're 6-3, and I don't think they've beaten any teams with more than 1 or 2 wins on the season. And that has to be concerning if you're a Buffalo Bills fan. And if you're a Browns fan, I mean, the Browns are a team with a ton of talent. They are coached by Freddie Kitchens, who was another one of these PlayStation coaches. And this is just not going to work out. The one difference is, like the Cleveland Browns, unlike the Cincinnati Bengals, will be willing to get rid of this man after a year. And the Browns' schedule is pretty easy the rest of the season, but from what we've seen, even with their wins this year, there's no reason to think, even if they're playing 7 horrid teams over the next 7 weeks, that they can win 6 of those games and get back into the playoff hunt. So the Cleveland Browns, your season's over. And I know that they were planning on having a Super Bowl parade, and that was pretty much stopped after the Week 1 beating they took by the Tennessee Titans. But it's time for them to move on from head coach Freddie Kitchens also, because Freddie is not the right man for the job either. All right, guys, real quick, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be back. And the next game to talk about are the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. We'll be back right after this.
Join BetNow.eu, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000. Just use the promo code TRUTH50. That's promo code TRUTH50.
All right, guys, we're back on the Grueling Truth Sports Network with the NFL show. I'm Mike Goodpaster. Right now we're going to transition to the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. The Bears have had a rough season all year long. Yesterday, they kind of righted the ship a little bit with a 20-13 win over the Matthew Stafford-less Detroit Lions, which I think that this is probably a Bears loss if Matt Stafford played. But Jeff Driscoll, who's been a guest on our show before, basically threw the ball 46 times yesterday. He was 27 for 46, 269 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I think the one thing that we take away from this, though, is the difference between Driscoll and Stafford is that Stafford makes big plays, explosive plays down the field. And outside of one big bomb to Kenny Galladay, there were just no big plays in the Lions passing game. And if Stafford is forced to miss multiple weeks, the Lions will struggle without a quarterback to can mask the putrid defense Detroit puts on the field. Matt Patricia's defense has proven it can't consistently stop anyone, as the Lions are now 3-5-1, have lost 5 of the last 6 tilts, and most of those were games where if the defense was just decent, they would have won the game. So now the question comes down to, is Matt Patricia in trouble? Because his defense, that's what he's known for, and his defense has fallen short here. I mean, with an average defense, they're probably sitting here at 6-3 with a good shot at the playoffs. The Chicago Bears, on the other hand, still didn't play well. And when you look at this Bears team, it's hard to see them making a run to the playoffs this year. They have major issues with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. I know he led 3 drives, but remember, Detroit's defense is bad, and Mitchell Trubisky, with no Matt Stafford on the other side, only put up 20 points yesterday. So I think there's big-time issues in Chicago, and there may even be bigger issues in Detroit if Matt Stafford can't play. All right, if there's any discussion about this, and me and Anthony, both at the start of the year on the first week show, said that we thought Ryan Tannehill should be the starter over Marcus Mariota. I think after what we've seen the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think there's no doubt Ryan Tannehill should have been the quarterback the whole time. And if he was, Tennessee would probably be winning the AFC South. But as it stands, they got themselves back in the playoff race with a 35-32 win over the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of this was Ryan Tannehill. The other was running back Derrick Henry, who had a great game. He had a season-high 188 yards on 23 carries with a pair of touchdowns, including a 1-yard score that followed a 68-yard burst. It was the 1-yard score that trimmed the Titans' lead to 9, or that trimmed the Titans' lead. Man, I said that all wrong. But when we look at this, it goes back to the other thing I've been talking about, Andy Reid. When you have a lead, especially by more than a touchdown in the second half, I know that you have this explosive offense, you have Patrick Mahomes, but at some point, Andy Reid needs to play smart. And by playing smart, you could still come out, you could line up no huddle and take the clock down to 1 or 2 seconds and snap the ball and run the play. And not everything has to be a pass. And I think that that is a problem here. I mean, they play this fast break kind of offense, but in the end, it's only going to get you so far. You got to be able to eat the clock up. You could ask the Atlanta Falcons and Dan Quinn and Kyle Shanahan from the Super Bowl a few years ago. No matter how explosive your offense is, if you keep running plays continually and quickly, it only takes 1 or 2 stops. I mean, the Titans won this game because they held the Kansas City Chiefs to a field goal at the end of the game, which gave them the ball back. Ryan Tannehill goes down the field and wins. I mean, the AFC South is completely wide open right now. And the Tennessee Titans are a team that have a old-style coach. They play very physical football, and they have a chance. I mean, these teams like Tennessee, Pittsburgh, these are all teams that nobody considers a Super Bowl contender. I'm not saying they're Super Bowl contenders, but why aren't they? I mean, we've watched the Colts play this kind of football and beat the Chiefs. We've watched the Steelers do it to the Rams and win. We watched the Titans do it to the Chiefs and win. There has to come some point where people realize there's a way to play football. And it's not with 4 or 5 wide receivers just running all over the place, throwing the ball all over the place, because eventually, you know, it's kind of like a basketball game where you got a fast-breaking team against a slow-down-the-tempo team. It's a lot easier to slow the game down than it is to speed the game up. And when you don't jump up 14-0, 20-0 on teams right away playing this style, it can come back and bite you in the ass. All right, so given the current state of the NFC South, there is nothing that can be done to salvage what has been a atrocious season for the Atlanta Falcons. They were 1-7 going into yesterday's game, but it seems like nobody informed them that their season was over, because they come out and they beat the New Orleans Saints, and they didn't just beat them in New Orleans. They dominated them in New Orleans 26-9. The Falcons played solid in all 3 phases of the game, And it's hard to overlook the self-inflicted errors that repeatedly snuffed out every inkling of momentum for the Saints. I still think the Saints could possibly be the best team in the NFL. This one game doesn't change that to me because this is the NFL. And as we saw yesterday, even if you're the better team, this is not like college football where Clemson's playing Wofford and you know who's going to win. It's true that on any given Sunday, these are teams of professional athletes where things like this can happen. We saw them get blown out by the Rams earlier in the year and then rattle off, 6 or 7 straight wins. So I think the Saints are fine. This is probably more of a wake-up call than anything else. And the Saints defense played well enough to give this team a chance to win. It was the Saints offense that fell short. And I don't think that that's going to happen much more. I mean, Sean Payton's a really good coach. So I think the Saints will be fine. This is a great win for the Falcons, but it still doesn't change the fact that their season's over. And at the end of the year, they're going to be watching the New Orleans Saints in the playoffs. All right, we had the Jets and the Giants yesterday. And if you're a Giants fan, if you're a Giants coach, you're wondering, what am I going to do when this year's over? Where am I going to move? How am I going to sell my house? Because I don't think that the coaching staff can survive a loss to the Jets. And the Giants looked putrid in the second half against the Cowboys after a solid first half last Monday night. But this game was terrible. I mean, neither team could get out of the way. The difference in this game was Sam Darnold, I think, outplayed Daniel Jones. So I don't think I got much else to say about this game. It's a bad football game that actually was entertaining, but it's still two bad football teams that are going nowhere. And it's two head coaches that I think should be going somewhere when this season's over, and that's far away from New York. All right, Tampa Bay head coach Bruce Arians welcomed his former team, the Arizona Cardinals, and they played at Raymond James Stadium yesterday. Jameis Winston captained a 30-27 comeback win over the Kyler Murray-led Arizona Cardinals in a battle of former Heisman Trophies winners. Jameis was Jameis. He delivered the good, the bad, the ugly, all in one 3-hour package on Sunday, and that's been his roller coaster of a calling card for the Buccaneers. Sometimes he looks great, sometimes he doesn't. Winston surpassed 300 yards for the 4th time in a row. He continued his reign as the king of the ugly 300-yarder game. He threw for 358 yards, 30 for 48 for one score, 2 interceptions, and a 75 quarterback ranking. And the Bucs returned home, snapped a 4-game skid. Arians bested his former franchise, and Winston turned in another entertaining afternoon, and this time it was a victorious one. And I like Jameis Winston. I'm the only person outside of his family I think that still does. But I think other than 2 poor performances this year, he has shown us that he has evolved and he is slowly getting better as a quarterback under the leadership of Bruce Arians. And this Buccaneers team's not bad. They've lost a lot of close games. And, defensively, I think they're better than what their ranking looks. I think they stopped the run well. They're not very good against the pass. But, David Johnson, 5 carries, 2 yards. Kenyon Drake, who was awesome last week, was held to 35 yards on 10 carries. And, Shaq Barrett is a good player. And the Bucs have linebackers like Levante David, defensive lineman, and Ndamukong Suh. So the cover's not bare in Tampa Bay. And in Tampa Bay, if you get another good draft and another good offseason, this could be a team that could be a factor in the future. All right, the Miami Dolphins offense looked decent in the first half. Ryan Fitzpatrick hit 7 different receivers for 122 yards, used his legs to score from a yards out, as the Indianapolis Colts were beaten by the Miami Dolphins 16-12. The Dolphins have now won 2 consecutive games. And the one thing I can say for Brian Flores, he is not of the Zach Taylor ilk. He coaches his football team. And the thing about that is his football team, they've got rid of almost everybody that was considered a star in the NFL, what few they had, and they have gotten better for it. And it's the great thing about football. It's why I always like to coach football, because you could have a group of guys that are under-talented, but they all fight their ass off, and you could still win football games, and you could still beat football teams that are more talented. And the Indianapolis Colts, even without their starting quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. They had Brian Hoyer in, and he's nowhere near what Jacoby Brissett is. But the Colts are still a better football team than the Dolphins. And Brian Flores has gotten his team to play hard the last few weeks. They play harder each week. They've now won 2 straight games. And I think when you look at Brian Flores now, you have to look at a guy that has done a pretty good job here. So, I mean, Brian Flores, I think, has done really well for himself. And I think this team, if they're letting him pick the players, I think this team is a team that is going to improve over the next couple of years. And Belichick and Brady aren't getting any younger. Somebody's got to be able to step up and take over the mantle of the best team in the AFC East when those guys retire. And I think, surprisingly enough, the Miami Dolphins in a couple of years could be that team. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look at tonight's Monday night matchup, which is the undefeated San Francisco 49ers against the 7-2 Seattle Seahawks. This is a huge game for both teams. The one interesting thing I found was the Seahawks' all-time record for Monday Night Football is 24-10, which is a percentage of .706. It is the highest winning percentage in NFL history on Monday Night Football. Quarterback Russell Wilson is simply playing football at a different level than anybody else right now. And, I mean, let's just face it, he's nuclear hot right now, especially coming off a 5-touchdown performance in an overtime win last week. He's the only player in league history to have 22 touchdown passes against only 1 interception at any point during an NFL season. And remember, this is the NFL's 100th season. When Wilson plays like the MVP frontrunner, this team keeps finding ways to escape with wins, and they perform their best in prime time. It's hard to pick against the Seahawks here, but I'm going to do it. I think the 49ers win again tonight. I think the Niners will come back to earth over the next few weeks, lose a couple games. But right now, the San Francisco 49er team, I think, is the most complete in the NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo has played much better as of late. They get a couple offensive linemen back. They get Usyk to fullback back tonight. So I think the 49ers have too much talent. I think the 49ers win this game, something like 31-20, 31-17. But I will make this caveat. If this game gets into the last 5 minutes and it's within a touchdown, I would change my pick to Russell Wilson because I think right now Russell Wilson should be the MVP in the NFL. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. Me and Anthony Cervino will be back tomorrow, as long as Anthony is over the shame of the Minnesota Vikings beating up on his Dallas Cowboys, which hopefully it will be because I really have a lot of things to say to Anthony. And, you know, hopefully everything clears up with Anthony's situation today and he'll be back tomorrow. I want to remind everybody, you can follow us at The Grueling Truth on Twitter, at Grueling Truth. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Mike Goodpaster, this has been The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.